This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 533 for November 12th of 2020. Automakers and suppliers search for a strategy in a world of mobility. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Hyundai, Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Gary, it's you.
It is. How are you, John?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Great. So I heard on the weather yesterday that we had 8.5 inches of snow a year ago. So I look outside now and I'm just ever so happy that there are just leaves everywhere on my lawn. It's a beautiful thing.
That's right. So any big thing in history this day?
All right. So this one, I even had a hard time believing. As you recall last week, because we wanted to rush right into the show, we didn't talk about how on November 5th, 1895, the Selden patent was granted. Okay, remember that?
I do.
Okay. So
not that I remember 1895. I'm not that old.
So here's the thing that's unbelievable. This is November 12th, 1912. The Supreme Court said there was no violation and that the car companies could go ahead without paying the licensing fee to Selden. I mean, what are the odds? You know, last week, this week, same subject.
Right.
All right, but there's another one. There's another important thing that happened, and this was in 1998, which I know you do remember. And this we'll be talking about this company later on in the show. At least one of these companies later on in the show.
1998? You got to give me a little bit more. I mean, there's only a billion companies out there.
Yeah. I'll just have to say it. So this was the day in 1998 that the Daimler Chrysler merger closed.
Oh man. Oh, we got to talk about this later in the show.
Well, so then we will be talking about Stellantis, and just for those who are curious, the Daimler Chrysler thing lasted until May of 2007, so didn't work out so well. So anyway, that's the important time, but we have important people to bring on.
Yeah, we do. Let's get to our fellow journalist, Pete Bigelow from Automotive News. Hello out there, Pete.
How are you, John? Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. Good to have you back on the show.
Gary, hello to you too.
Pete, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
And let's bring in our special guest for the day too. It's Brian Goldstine. He's the president of Mobility Solutions and Fleet Management at Bridgestone Americas. And Brian, so good to have you on the show.
Great to be on the show, John. Appreciate the opportunity and great to spend some time with you and Gary and Pete. Great to see you as well.
Well, you know, I'm so curious to learn, really, along with the audience here, what the heck advantages or opportunities does a tire company see in mobility?
Yeah, I think it starts with what business you think you're in. And we like to think that we're in more than just the tire business. We're in the business of helping people and goods get from point A to point B. And that ultimately means how do we help fleets or end consumers or whoever it might be do so in a way that is more efficient, safer, and more sustainable. And so ultimately that's our charge, and that's what we're focused on delivering against.
Brian, when you talk about mobility in fleets, now are you talking about fleets of, say, autonomous Uber vehicles at some point in the future, or are you talking about the endless Amazon trucks that I can see out the window driving by in my neighborhood?
Yeah, I think it's really all of the above. I think there's opportunities for us today to help fleet customers that we already work with, that we sell tires to become more efficient in their operations, help them to lower their total cost of ownership, increase their uptime, reduce their downtime, and into the future. I think it's going to be very important in terms of the role of the tire in an autonomous vehicle world. It's the only part of the car that actually is touching the ground. And so there's a lot of critical information that can come from the tire to enable a safe, autonomous kind of environment.
Brian, can you elaborate on that just a little bit? Are we talking like road condition information, weather information? What sort of insight can the tire provide to the rest of the vehicle in that autonomous situation?
Sure. So one of the things that we focus on is aggregation of data, and that data can help us to better understand the overall. Leveraging that data in terms of then applying advanced analytics in terms of what can happen to the performance of the vehicle. And so you can start at one end of the spectrum with gathering information coming from the vehicle today that we can help to provide better understanding of what's going to happen with that vehicle under different conditions, performance conditions. But if you take it to the point of incorporating sensors into the tire, we can help to understand better road conditions, as you mentioned, related to weather conditions, overall wear of the tire and the impact that that will have in terms of the performance of the vehicle. So I can give you some specific examples if they're helpful, but there's a lot of information that can come off of the tire that can help the overall vehicle ecosystem.
Is
Yeah,
this
I'd love to hear
information
some of
coming
those
off
examples.
Yeah, so in the case of today, we're already doing this. And so we're able to get vehicle information that we can apply advanced analytics to with a sensor on the tire that can help us to better understand the performance. Well, first you start with air pressure and air temperature, but providing that information in a more automated way to the fleet or to whoever is operating that vehicle, and then helping to overlay that with some type of algorithm or predictive information to help them to better be able to care for that vehicle. So we have a product today, we call it IntelliTire, where there's a sensor on the tire. It's communicating information ultimately up to the cloud, and we're applying alerts or reporting. We can overlay that with algorithms. So if that tire is starting to lose pressure at a slow rate, generally most air pressure loss situations tend to be slow losses in air pressure, could take 3 or 4 days. And you might not normally find out until you get to that threshold where your light goes on and tells you you have an air pressure warning, if that vehicle has that type of a system. Very prevalent on passenger vehicles, not necessarily so on the commercial side. We can let you know ahead of time by applying an algorithm which actually is able to recognize that tire is losing pressure more slowly, so that we can set up the appropriate type of service to address that issue before it becomes an issue.
Brian, I'm curious, when you just mentioned individual vehicles, I'm curious if you could take some of that, weather information, for example, and share it fleet-wide, and can a fleet operator then kind of get efficiencies or, understand there's a pothole on one particular road and the rest of the cars should avoid it? Can that sort of information be aggregated and then shared throughout a fleet?
Yeah, absolutely. The IntelliTire solution I was just mentioning, that's really a solution we have in the market today for trucks and buses. And that information, as it gets aggregated in the cloud, we can provide the right type of reporting to whomever the fleet manager is that they can deploy throughout their entire fleet. Ultimately, as we talk about sensors, we're talking about being integrated into the overall or the broader vehicle ecosystem. And so if there's road conditions, if there's weather-related concerns in terms of how the vehicle's going to perform, that can absolutely be aggregated and provided on a broader scale.
Brian, so does this mean that when a tire is produced for a truck or for a bus, that sensors are literally embedded in the tire?
So that is where we're headed. We don't necessarily have that in the market today, but that is an opportunity for the future. We do have an aftermarket solution, which is the IntelliTire I mentioned. We are working on a tire-mounted sensor, which would be included with inside the tire. And it could provide all kinds of information regarding, as we mentioned, road conditions. It can tie into overall the wear rate of the tire, help to inform, in addition to things like pressure and temperature.
Is this IntelliTire then that's in the market right now, like a tire pressure monitor that's on the wheel itself then?
Yeah, it's an automated tire pressure monitoring system, but it goes beyond just giving you a notification in your dash. It actually connects up and makes sure that the alerts, when there is an issue, get into the hands of the right people who can address it, as well as the vision is ultimately, it's a very analog, very manual, very labor-intensive ecosystem today. And so a big part of what we're focused on is helping to automate that ecosystem, helping to leverage technology to make it more efficient. And so not only could we identify there's an issue, but also make sure that we're helping to get that service taken care of. We often talk about this framework of sense, think, and act. So if you think of the sensor doing the sensing, and when we talk about sensing, it doesn't have to just come from a sensor in the tire, but there's lots of information related to the vehicle that, based on our understanding of how tires wear, the construction of the tire, the materials used to develop and make the tire, once we aggregate that information, we can develop simulations on how that tire is going to perform over time. And so then that's the thinking part of it. And so we apply advanced analytics, AI, machine learning, and then can deploy these algorithms or predictive models to help drive the act piece of it. And it's not just alerting somebody to an issue, but it's actually connecting into our service network. So we can actually then take care of the issue before it happens.
Brian, sorry, Gary. I'm curious because if sensors and tires are what's going to win out in the long run, automakers, as you know, are putting all kinds of sensors in vehicles right now, all over the place, including on the suspension. You've got radar, LiDAR, you've got cameras, you've got all kinds of other things. What's the advantage of actually putting it in a tire? How do you convince OEMs that's the route to go?
Yeah, I think it depends on the use case. And that's part of the conversations we have with OEMs today in terms of what incremental value we can bring with inclusion of a sensor in a tire. And I can give you an example is there's the driver assistance systems today in vehicles. By incorporating a sensor into a tire, we can gather incremental data in terms of potential damage to that tire, wear rates of that tire, that we can incorporate into things like ADAS systems. And so right now, those driver assistance systems, they're generally based on averages in terms of kind of the overall wear of that tire. But your tire brand new versus at 50% wear versus 80% wear is going to behave differently, as well as depending on what the road conditions are, what the weather conditions are. And so we can help to inform that driver assistance system of, a stopping power going to be less than what it would have normally assumed on average. If you think about in a commercial application of platooning, what's the appropriate distance between those vehicles? Even for passenger vehicles, are you following too closely to the person ahead of you based on the overall wear of your tires? If you're going to be in wet conditions and you're going to make a turn, do you need to be going slower than maybe you thought you could be based on the wear of your tires or the conditions of those tires? And so it's really gathering information directly from the tire that can help better inform systems that already exist in the vehicle.
Brian, I was wondering about, you were mentioning autonomous vehicles before, and it seems to me that, if Pete, John, or I are going out to our car and we see our tires low, we know we need to do something. But for an autonomous vehicle that's just rolling around, there's nobody who's looking necessarily at the tires. Do you see an opportunity there in order to, help those fleets keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, conversations that we're already having, and where we see value is if you're an autonomous vehicle, you don't want to have a tire related issue. You don't want that downtime. That'd be a very big dissatisfier. And so by providing the sensor in the tire or by deploying potentially other solutions that we are developing we can mitigate or prevent that issue from even occurring.
Brian, I'm curious, we're taking all these data and insights and thinking about how the fleet owners could use it, be it a human-powered fleet or an autonomous one. I'm curious if there's third parties who are also interested in receiving this data and whether for business intelligence or weather information. Can this information be aggregated and then sold to third parties or put on data platforms where others can access it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say we see ourselves as part of this broader mobility ecosystem. And a lot of the solutions we're developing in and of themselves are platforms, and they're going to need to integrate with other platforms. And there's data that we can benefit from to help improve our solutions. And there's data we'll generate, which could likely help other solutions. And so, very much as we think about our role in this ecosystem, we're very much of an open platform kind of a mindset, so that we can help support kind of the broader set of connected vehicle solutions.
Hey, we've got a lot more to talk to you about, Brian, but we got to take a quick commercial break right now and give a shout out to our great sponsor, Hyundai.
What's the weather tomorrow?
High of 64.
Find me the closest coffee shop.
20 results found.
And a date for tonight.
Oh, you're good.
Introducing dynamic voice recognition in the all-new Hyundai Elantra.
All right, we're back with Brian Goldstine from Bridgestone, talking all about mobility and fleet services. Brian, I'm wondering, we've been talking about commercial fleet. Do you see other advantages out there with, just regular everyday consumers? And I ask that because as a tire company, you've got, certainly in the United States, all these Firestone stores all across the country. In a sense, you could almost think that each one of those stores has its own fleet of customers. Do you see any advantages of going after that with this business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're experiencing a world right now where consumer expectations are changing. And so people are looking for more, obviously contact-free type of solutions, more concierge-like buying experiences. And one of the advantages we have with having over 2,200 of our Firestone complete auto care stores is we have that direct interaction every single day with the consumer. And so we can really learn in terms of what's their interests, and we can start to complement our brick and mortar footprint with other types of complementary solutions, such as more mobile type of solutions. We have Firestone Direct, which is a mobile tire and service business that we're expanding in the southeast part of the country. And it helps to complement that brick and mortar, because ultimately what we're looking to do is provide the consumer the service they're looking for, when they want it, where they want it, and even give them more options in terms of how they pay for it.
Brian, I'm curious. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I want to turn John's question upside down. And so you're dealing with truck fleets, and it seems to me that truck fleets are more obsessed about the performance of their vehicles because, the uptime is absolutely essential. Do you see the work that you guys do in terms of concentrating on fleet activities that then comes back and informs what you can do with the consumers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certain segments of the market where the technology develops more quickly. So mining is a perfect example. In a mining operation, downtime can be extraordinarily costly to the mine operator, and they're spending tens of thousands of dollars on a tire. And so they want to make sure they maximize the life of that tire, and they want to make sure they maximize the loads in those vehicles and keep those vehicles running. And so that's where you'd find today the most robust automated tire pressure monitoring systems. We have something called iTrack, and not only is it measuring things like pressure and temperature, but there's accelerometers, so you can measure lateral and horizontal G-force. You can do geofencing, and some of the value there is if that vehicle is the road in the mine is too undulated, you'll exceed the horizontal G-force, which can put undue strain on that tire, reducing the life of the tire, as well as potentially creating a safety concern for the person driving that vehicle. Or if they take a turn too fast, you could exceed lateral G-force, and that also could put strain on that tire and reduce the life of that tire and create a safety issue. So these types of technologies, which then we're able to communicate those potential issues directly to the mind real time. So they can adjust the speed, they could change the curve so that it's not put so much strain on the vehicle. They can flatten out the undulations in the road. If the pressure or the temperature of the tires is getting to a point which is exceeding, recommended thresholds, then we can reroute them to another route. All of these learnings and all these technologies are really going to move down market over time, and you're starting to see them adopted more in truck and bus, and over time, more and more, I believe, in the passenger side of the market as well, especially as fleets become even more and more prevalent within the passenger side of the market.
Brian, I wanted to ask you about the bus side of those things. So it's funny you brought that up. It sounds like Bridgestone does a lot of work, in particular with bus fleets, and how does all this kind of translate over and kind of give fleet operators, maybe public transit agencies, similar insights?
Yeah, very good. So it's interesting because I think, John, I read an article you wrote this week in Wards about the shift in terms of buying products versus paying per use. And bus segment is actually a very interesting segment because in both transit buses as well as motor coach or more leisure type of coach buses, we already have a business model, which has actually been around for quite a long time, where people pay on a per mile basis. If you're driving a coach bus and you have a group of people, the last thing you want is downtime. And you want to pay for you want to make sure that bus is operational. So not only do we have an opportunity for that fleet to be able to pay on a per mile basis, but we're integrating solutions like IntelliTire. And so they are able to make sure that the understanding of their tire pressure is automated, it's communicating real time, and they're able to maintain the right tire pressures, which not only ensure the uptime, but also provide other benefits as well in terms of fuel economy, and that it helps them with their overall efficiency of their operation.
Hey, we've got a question here from one of the viewers. Chuck Grenchi wants to know, will these tire data sensors be transparent to the private sector price-wise? He says, I'd hate to have to pay for something that would benefit data collectors and not the private owner.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Thanks, Chuck. The intent is to create value for the private owner, for the fleet, whoever that end consumer is, based on the value that data brings. And so, pricing models, I'd say that's something that still to be explored a bit. But ultimately, the overall value proposition of that tire and the value proposition of getting you from point A to point B, that data can only help increase the overall likelihood of driving efficiency, safety, and greater sustainability benefits.
We've got another question here from 47 Solar. I'm not sure I totally understand the question. You'll probably get it immediately. He says, what about a Firestone Prime type of value add? Seems like memberships offer added incentives to customers and they create a revenue stream for the business. And now I sort of get it. It's like Amazon Prime. What about a Firestone Prime?
47 Solar, that's a great idea. One of the areas that we're very much focused on is exploring new business models and understanding how we provide the customer, be it a fleet or an end consumer, the opportunity to pay the way they like to pay. So subscriptions, memberships, those are definitely areas that we are currently exploring. And so, if the fleet wants to pay on a per mile basis, that's something that we can offer today. If somebody wants peace of mind, and so that they don't, as an end consumer, kind of get shocked with having to outlay a significant amount of money at one point in time for new tires or other vehicle services, the opportunity to sign up for a membership or a subscription to help mitigate that type of, that type of cost to them at one point in time. Definitely opportunity areas that we're exploring.
Brian, mentioning shocked, it brings to mind that we're getting an increased number of electric vehicles. And one of the characteristics of electric vehicles is we don't hear a whole lot of noise from the engine, right? Because
Yes.
the electric motors are doing it. So you hear a lot more road noise than anything. And this may not be in your space, but I was just wondering, are you guys working on making tires quieter as they roll down the road?
So, yeah, not my sweet spot here, but I will say that understanding the needs of the customer related to vehicles is absolutely something we're working on. And, not only electric vehicles don't make much noise, and so you might hear other noises like from tires, but in terms of maximizing range and, the implications to rolling resistance, the high torque of an electric vehicle and the impact that can have on tire wear, those are all areas that we're definitely investing our material science into to make sure that we can provide the right solution for that use case.
Brian, we're getting down to the end of the segment here, but have we missed something? Is there something that you think that you should be bringing up on the show?
I think, people often think of Bridgestone maybe as somebody makes tires, and we do, and we take great pride in making the best quality tires in the marketplace. But we also recognize that there's a lot of value that we can bring beyond just making a tire. And so be it tire-centric solutions to help drive greater efficiency and drive greater safety, more sustainable benefits, and then being part of this connected ecosystem around the vehicle and leveraging the data that's coming from the vehicle, as well as providing data to that ecosystem and connecting into these other platforms is something we're very much focused on and excited to bring that value to fleets, as we've talked about, bringing that value to end consumers in terms of the experience they have, as well as working with OE partners.
And I'm intrigued too, just as a follow-up to wrap this up, you're the president of this system. I mean, Firestone, Bridgestone must see, Bridgestone, Firestone must see, this is really something that could help grow the company.
Yeah, it's very consistent with our vision, moving the world ahead and establishing Bridgestone as a sustainable solutions company. And so this is a big piece of where we see the value creation for the future. And so we are investing. The idea is, we sell products, but we also want to create and sell value, recurring value to customers. And that's by helping them to be able to drive greater efficiency, as I said, or greater safety. And we also want to be able to create and sell value as a system, which for us means being part of this connected ecosystem.
Brian, I'm curious if I can ask one more, John.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Are we talking about branching out from the traditional, motor vehicle market? Are we talking about e-bikes and micromobility solutions as well? Is that on your radar?
So that fully could be in the consideration set. In Bridgestone Europe today, we do have a business called Mobiflex, which is electric bikes. So, as part of this new world, we're definitely exploring and experimenting in terms of new business models, new types of solutions, really trying to take much more of an agile, kind of nimble approach. And so we're very much open to exploring new opportunities, micromobility. The focus will likely, tend to be more on kind of motor vehicles all the way from passenger vehicles up through mining vehicles. But we are open to exploring what other areas could make sense as well.
And with that, we're going to have to wrap this segment up. But Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show. Very, very interesting. And I loved having you on because as a tire maker, getting into mobility, I think is sort of an example of what every supplier and automaker in the business is trying to do right now.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate the time and thank you very much. Thanks, John. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
We're going to take a quick commercial break right now and give a shout out to our friends at Borg Warner.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back talking all things automotive. We had a number of other questions come in from viewers too. We'll try to get to the ones that we can. We can't get to them all, but please keep the questions coming. But Gary, you always have a list of topics that we ought to get into. What's on your list?
So you guys may have noticed, but last week there was an election, and but wait, I want to talk about something that had to happen that was election related, but different. So in the city of Austin, they passed a $7.1 billion proposal to increase mass transit. We were just talking about buses and fleets and things like that. Okay, they $7.1 billion for that. And in addition, there was another proposition, Proposition B, which they're spending $460 million on building out things like bike trails and more sidewalks and making the city of Austin, which is pretty congested nowadays because it is such the place to be, more friendly to micromobility, which Pete brought up at the end there. And so I think that, we ought to talk a little bit about this subject. We haven't talked about this much on the show. And I know that Pete is covering all forms of mobility very, very carefully. And, I just want to get a sense of what's happening. McKinsey had done a study pre-COVID, which estimated that in 2030, the market would be on the order of $500 billion for micromobility. Now we're talking e-scooters, we're talking bicycles, we're talking e-bikes, we're talking just, all manner of little transport devices that are not cars. And, they thought that maybe there would be a big shift as a result of COVID with people, being very reticent to do these things. But now they're finding, actually, they're doing more research and they're finding that more people are taking longer trips on these e-bikes and e-scooters and other forms of micromobility. So, Pete, where do you see this going?
It's interesting. I mean, to your point, during COVID, there's these big seismic shifts in the way people are getting around. And I think, micromobility is one of the beneficiaries of these changes, especially as we see cities across the United States, which is kind of more surprising than other places in the globe, where they're shutting streets down and dedicating that space specifically to pedestrians, to non-motorized vehicles like e-scooters, like bicycles, and as we shift the use of this infrastructure. Is it temporary? Is it permanent? I don't know. But you can start to glimpse a future in which micromobility is more important. And I see that shift perhaps most dramatically here in the United States.
Yeah, I was looking. I saw some numbers that so outside the United States, Milan is going to be changing over 35 kilometers of roads to dedicating it to walking and bicycles. Paris is converting 50 kilometers, Brussels converting 40 kilometers. Seattle has closed 30 kilometers of streets, turning it over to walking and biking. Montreal is creating more than 320 kilometers of pedestrian and bike paths. I mean, so I mean, we're seeing this global shift, and I just wonder, are there implications for OEMs with this?
Yes. In some sense, I think the real loser is public transit. And I think there's some optimistic data that would show that both micromobility and traditional car ownership are on the rise during COVID. So I think the takeaway for OEMs might be that even as we close certain roads to traditional traffic, maybe this is the best of both worlds. Maybe this is the mobility shift that they've been truly talking about, and we're finding there's room for more than one way to get around on our public infrastructure.
Yeah, I think another interesting data point is that sales of e-bikes are growing faster than sales of electric cars. Now, that may change in the future, but they're so much more affordable, so much easier to be able to store, especially if you live in an apartment. Very easy to recharge. You just remove the battery and take it into your home or your apartment or your place at work. So e-bike sales are booming, certainly in Europe, the United States, and China.
But Pete, you raise an interesting point here about how this could have a huge effect on mass transit, which, I mean, as we looked at the New York subways, as a result of the pandemic, that ridership just completely plummeted because people didn't want to be so close. And so, we have seen car sales going up. And, there is some argument that people feel safer in their own vehicle than something that is shared. So do we get to a point where, John puts his bike in the back of his vehicle, drives part of the way to his office, parks where it isn't too expensive, and then rides in the rest of the way and then, reverses it on the way home?
I think, first of all, are we going to be commuting to offices in any form for a while? That's one big part of the shift, is the lack of commuting, and at least in certain quarters. But that the future that you outlined, or that scenario, is exactly what a lot of cities have been encouraging. You have an app like Move It, or a lot of mobility as a service apps where there's the app helping you plan your multimodal journey. And I don't know that I've seen enough statistics to say that there's a definite uptick in that right now, but certainly I think the key right now is that we're at an inflection point where people are changing their habits, in a variety of forms and fashions. So now is the time, I think, for people to perhaps we'll see more experimentation along those lines.
So there was another election result from last week, not the one you guys are thinking about. I know, I can tell just watching your faces. But we mentioned this in a show or two ago, the Prop 22 in California, whether the Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all of those people would be employees or continue to be gig workers. And lo and behold, the people at Lyft and the people at Uber are exuberant because they won. And so the people are still gig workers. Pete, what do you see as the implications of this?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's a lifeline for companies like Uber and Lyft primarily. This, I don't know if existential is quite the right word, but I mean, this was a 5-alarm fire ringing for them if they were going to have to reclassify independent workers as employees. That would dramatically change a business model that, let's be honest, they have not exactly been raking in the profits in the last few quarters. In fact, they've been losing hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that this maybe was existential in some fashion. I'm curious if you guys agree.
Yeah, Lyft lost $500 million in the third quarter. I mean,
well, wait, did they ever make money? I mean, have Lyft or Uber ever turned a profit?
I think they've lost less up until February or March. Maybe there was some optimism that they were going to lose less in 2020.
Yeah, I don't think they've made any money yet. And I would say, Gary, that had this proposition not been approved and they had to turn those gig workers into employees, that would have killed their business. They're already losing money. And now if they have to provide health care and more wages and higher costs, I think it would have killed that business.
So now that we've got the impending vaccine, do their fortunes increase?
I think that they don't lose as much, but let's reverse things back to December of 2019 to the point that they weren't making money then. even if they got back to December 2019, what is the long-term path to profitability? And I don't know that I have seen a clear picture of what that looks like, even if you remove COVID from our thought process.
Well, Pete, don't you think they're pinning all their hopes on autonomous vehicles at some point in the future that theoretically could drive down their costs dramatically to where they could make money?
Theoretically is, probably the key word, John. I think so when does that future arrive? Are they going to sustain these losses for 5 more years, 10 more years? There's a researcher at MIT named Ashley Nunez whose work has, shown, I think, that the cost of running a ride-hailing operation is an autonomous ride-hailing operation, I should, add, is more expensive than the rosy estimates that we've seen. That they don't think it's going to be much cheaper on a per mile basis than what we have right now. In some situations, it might be more expensive.
Yeah, I've seen the study. I've read the study. Clearly, Waymo, Cruise, Aurora, nobody else agrees with that.
They don't, but it's interesting to see the news this week with Cruise partnering with Walmart on a delivery pilot project. And I think what a lot of places, like the ones you mentioned, maybe like Cruise, are realizing, because delivery was not in Cruise's plans until recently. So I think they're realizing that there may be more money to be made, at least in the short term, on the delivery side, and not on the carting around human passengers side of an autonomous operation.
Yeah, but that's always been the plan. I mean, Ford has talked openly of delivering people during the day and goods and other things at night.
Yeah, I think you're right. Ford has been pretty prescient with that, but I think others who started out more focused on the human passenger side have made a gradual shift. But I think you're right that Ford has obviously been aiming for the middle of both these markets and doing both at once with the same cars, keeping the operation running as close to 24/7 as possible.
Yeah, well, and that's been the plan, I think, for the AV industry all along. To get to that magical 20 cents a mile that Larry Burns has talked about. It's all about utilization. And if you have a car like today and it's parked 90% of the time, yowza, your cost per mile is really high. If you're using that, I'm not going to say 24/7, but let's say you're using that vehicle 10, 12 hours a day, your cost per mile can drop dramatically.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see, what is that threshold of utilization where any of these companies can turn a profit? Is it 75% of the time they're on the road with earning a fare of some fashion? I think that's a key question that it's hard to get a real good answer on. But I think it's a very high percentage.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the aforementioned Ford, this morning they officially introduced the E-Transit, the electric version of their commercial truck. And to your point, John, one of the points that Jim Farley just really kept hammering home is the fact that there's the total cost of ownership is going to be really good for people who buy these, because of maintenance is going to be far less than it is on an internal combustion engine version of the transit vehicle. So with that as prologue, I want to let's walk through the companies that are offering electric vehicles and the strategies that they're using, because I think we're beginning to see some companies, like for example Ford, really saying, hey, we have strength in the commercial line, and therefore this is a good play for us to have electric transits. We're going to have an electric F-150, which presumably is going to be a commercial thing. And then, oh, by the way, we have this Mach-E thing as well. But, it seems to me they're really focusing on how we're going to generate revenues, how we're going to generate volume, and we'll do it from our commercial customers rather than, trying to compete head on with Tesla. Yes, we have the Mach-E, but these other things are probably more important. Do you guys see that happening with them?
John, you want to take that?
Well, I'll start, and you can join in, Pete. Yeah, look, Ford is, for all practical purposes right now, a commercial vehicle company. That's where their greatest sales, certainly their greatest profits are. Jim Farley has talked about Ford potentially becoming the Tesla of commercial vehicles. And it's not just putting batteries in vans and trucks that is the transformation. The transformation comes when you offer over-the-air updates, you collect data, you provide digital services, and so you can sell these fleets the management of their, just like Brian Goldstine was talking about, of paying by mile for the tire, which I find an intriguing concept. Same with fleets. Ford will be able to provide these fleet owners and operators with a bunch of information that can reduce their total cost of ownership, can monitor what the driver is doing, suggest ways of improving the productivity. And so when you look at the total cost of ownership, which is what is paramount to fleets, then maybe the upfront cost of an EV is not so bad. That's not something that individual consumers like the three of us can do. We can't necessarily monetize all this stuff and improve our fleet of electric vehicles. And so I like Ford's strategy of really going headfirst in the commercial sector with this.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, John. I think that's when you're talking total cost of ownership and you are helping fleets save money on maintenance, on downtime of vehicles, et cetera, that's where you make your gains and your big push into electric.
Okay, but so now I'll turn the tables a little bit. If we look at the General Motors strategy, okay, and they've been pouring billions of dollars into getting their factories ready to produce electric vehicles, but they're talking about things like, the Hummer EV. They're talking about the Cadillac Lyriq. They're talking about the Cruise Origin. Yes, they're probably going to be having an electric Silverado, but they're also going to be having EV versions of SUVs for Buick, the Bolt EUV, which will be more of an SUV thing. I don't hear a whole lot of commercial out of those guys. What are they not seeing?
Well, I mean, I think what they are seeing is a global environment that is changing toward EV no matter what. And I think that they are preparing the product line for a transformation that has to come. But I think it's maybe I don't want to say a longer road because these plans are relatively short term, but it is a different strategy for sure. And I don't see the commercial side, to your point, that we do see with Ford.
Look, when any company sets out a strategy as to what we're going to do into the future, you want to play to your strengths. Ford is really strong in commercial vehicles. Arguably number one in the world. And so they've crafted a strategy built around the strength in the commercial sector. General Motors is so powerful in full-size SUVs. They dominate the segment. They make so much money on their SUVs. It's incredible. So they have crafted a strategy around full-size SUVs, and when you see the price tag of a Hummer at $112,000, $113,000, even the cheap one's going to be $80,000. They've crafted a strategy around where they're very strong and where they can make a lot of profit. So I'm not sure that it's that GM doesn't see what Ford sees in the commercial sector. It's just that they've crafted a strategy that plays to their strength.
But I mean, if we look at things like the Lyriq, John, I mean, the Lyriq is not an Escalade. I mean, the Lyriq is a mid-size compact SUV. I mean, it's not a humongous vehicle. Is it just because it's a Cadillac and they're going to be able to add a few dollars to the sticker?
Well, look, remember, there's a whole bunch of variations that are going to come off that Ultium platform. They're just going to drop all different kinds of top hats on it. They're going to make a couple of vehicles for Honda. Potentially, if it all goes through, they'll even make the Nikola Badger pickup truck. So Give it time. I think they will, and they've got to be very careful. They don't want to come out with an electric vehicle SUV right now that is exactly the same size as the Escalade and could potentially eat into the Escalade. They got to be a little bit careful about how they come to market with these vehicles. But you watch, within about 5 years' time, Cadillac's going all electric. They're definitely going to have an electric Escalade or whatever they want to call it at that point.
All right, so let's talk about some niche players in this space. Okay, Rivian. So they have this strategy where they're going to have a pickup truck and they're going to have an SUV. They have a giant factory in Illinois. Presumably, they want to fill that factory. Now they are building commercial vehicles for Amazon, and, which may be the real play there. But I mean, okay. What do you guys see as their approach to the market?
To your point, I think Amazon and the commercial side certainly is the short-term profit-making strategy. And one thing I really like about Rivian that you referenced is the fact they have this manufacturing facility in Illinois. They didn't have to spend. I forget. You guys will have to remind me like what it was before. Was it old Mitsubishi plant?
Diamond Star.
And they had to get the facility up to date, but they didn't have to build from scratch and spend a whole lot of money to do that. So I like the fact that they, saved a lot with making modifications rather than starting from scratch on the facility side.
Yeah, I mean, look, commercial, we're talking commercial again. That's going to be the salvation for Rivian, for Lordstown Motors, probably for all these startups with the exception of Tesla. The Cybertruck, I don't think is going to necessarily appeal to traditional pickup buyers. I don't think it's going to appeal to fleet owners either because the bed size is a lot smaller than what a full-size pickup offers. I think the Cybertruck's going to bring a whole new people into the segment. But I don't think Tesla's really looking at commercial, with the exception of the Tesla Semi. That's a pure commercial play, obviously, with a semi-truck. But I think as far as all these other pickups go, it's going to come down to total cost of ownership. You can, as we talked earlier, you can, with a straight face, tell a fleet owner they're going to save money over the life of this truck than if they buy a diesel or a gasoline-powered one.
What about the non-commercial side though? Like what about Fisker? What about Lucid? Where do they fit into the market? Just chasing Tesla?
Well, let's hold that thought. We got to take another very quick break and give a shout out to our good sponsor, Bridgestone. All right, we're back. What were you saying, Pete?
So I would say, what about the Lucids, the Fiskers of the world that don't seem to have this commercial side? They seem to be more chasing the luxury buyers that in trying to take on Tesla perhaps more head on.
Yeah, what do you think, Gary?
Well, I mean, I think that both of those companies recognize that there is an unmet demand, that there is a certain number of people who want something different. Now, I think that, in the case of Lucid, we had, Peter Rawlinson and Derek Jenkins on the show last week. And, Peter Rawlinson was emphasizing the fact that, yes, the Lucid Air is going to be a luxury vehicle. He wants it to be compared to the Mercedes S-Class. He doesn't want it to be compared to anything below that. He doesn't see it as a competitor with the Model S. And he had been the chief engineer on the Model S, so he knows a little something about that. So he wants it to be a different thing. But he also said to us that he is looking forward to the opportunity to taking the technology that they have developed for the Lucid Air and bringing it to a lower strata in the market, so there'll be more of a mass play. You look at the price of the Fisker Ocean, and where they're positioning that at is around $40,000, And, if we look at what KBB is saying, that the average transaction price for a vehicle nowadays, I mean, that's just basically almost in the heart of the market. So I think that on the one hand, you're seeing Lucid saying, well, yeah, there are X number of people who buy Lexus LS and S-Class and 7 Series and things like that. We'll get some of that, okay? And then Fisker trying to say, well, you know what? There are people who want to have electric vehicles that look cool, and we're going to provide that.
Yeah, I think the startups all recognize the window of opportunity is right now. Tesla led the way. Tesla's been out a decade ahead of everybody. But these other startups recognize that we've got a window of opportunity before the big lumbering dinosaur traditional OEMs get their act together and start rolling out electric cars. So if we can establish a brand image, if we can establish a customer base, we've got a chance to survive in the transition. But, by probably 2025, it's going to be all over. The majors are going to be out there with full lineups of electric vehicles. They're going to have thousands and thousands of dealerships. They're going to be really hard to fight against. And the other thing that's an opportunity for the startups right now is money is available. Whether it's venture capital money, whether it's through a reverse merger or whatever it happens to be, the money is there right now. You better take advantage of it.
John, but I'm not so sure that the majors, the established OEMs are going to have a real advantage for going forward against some of these startup companies. I mean, we saw that BMW came out with is it the 9 or the iX or
the 9? Yeah, the iX, or somebody saying it's pronounced iCross.
Okay, whatever it is. Okay, so here we have an SUV, and what is the range of this big vehicle? 300 miles, maybe. Okay, and this is coming when? In 2022?
Yeah.
I mean, am I missing something here?
No, that's a great point. Listen, the German luxury brands are way behind when it comes to this electrification race. Their specs are not as good as what Tesla's got, for example. They still don't have full over-the-air update capabilities in their traditional vehicles. Even some of the new electrics don't have the same over-the-air capability Tesla does. It's been a shock, frankly, to see that they have not been able to leverage this great engineering prowess that they have in the EV field.
And I want to switch things up here. Okay, so at the top of the show, mentioned Daimler Chrysler, which we are now going to have the combination of Fiat Chrysler automobiles and PSA are going to get together and they're going to become Stellantis. Okay, and so this means this is the FCA side. Abarth, Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat Professional, Jeep, Lancia, Ram, and Maserati. On the PSA side, we have Peugeot, Citroën, Opel, Vauxhall, and DS. All right. Now, okay, so two things occur to me. One is when we were talking about these electric vehicle strategies that companies have, I'm not sure, does FCA have one?
Yeah, they do. And actually, it's not a bad strategy. They're going to be a fast follower. What FCA has said is, oh my gosh, look at the upfront investment to go full battery electric, but the market's not there yet. So, I mean, you can argue all day long of whether you like the strategy or not, but it's not a bad strategy to say, why don't we be fast followers? We'll come to the market with BEVs when the market is established, but we're not going to be a pioneer and take all the arrows.
And along similar lines, I'd say that's, it's a mirror image of their autonomous vehicle strategy, which, 3-4 years ago, we were all scratching our heads saying, why are they not doing the same things that GM and Ford are? But in retrospect, it's been really smart that they've kind of developed a Pacifica that can be upfitted with a self-driving system from a Waymo or a Voyage or an Aurora. And, they can supply Pacificas to everyone who wants to use them. And that has been, I think, a really smart strategy in retrospect.
All right. So Pete, is it strategy or is it dumb luck? Okay. Because let's think about this, that if we look in the market, I mean, so I mean, what Waymo was saying, oh, we want something that has a sliding door, right? Because that will make it easy to get, in and out. What has sliding doors? Oh, that's right, minivans. What do we have in terms of the minivan market? We have the Toyota Sienna, we have the Honda Odyssey, and we have the Pacifica. And I think maybe Kia still has, what is theirs called? Sedona. So basically, you're a company and you're in the United States, and you say to yourselves, what minivan should I use? Oh, that's right, I'll use an American minivan. I'll use the one from Chrysler, right? So and so I mean, I have a hard time believing that Sergio was sitting there years ago saying, you know what, we're going to develop this Pacifica and it will be a phenomenal success among the autonomous vehicle development companies. I mean, they went looking, those cars were there, they used them.
Well, in some form or fashion, you make your own luck. And I think that, they certainly struck the right partnership with Waymo, or Waymo struck it with them. I'm not sure exactly how it came together, but and they've worked to ensure that it is easy to upfit a self-driving system. So yes, you're probably right that the pickings were slim and they were there, and it may have been not that difficult in the first place, but on the other hand, it's working nonetheless. So maybe in some way that's how the Stellantis will evolve on the EV side as well.
So John, you'll remember this. Wasn't there going to be a deal between Waymo and Ford, and it was going to be announced the Detroit Auto Show? Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, it was supposed to be at CES.
Okay.
And in fact, we were all there standing in front of the stage and they were expecting this big announcement. And Mark Fields came out and didn't say word one about Waymo. And so what I have heard, and you got to take this with a grain of salt because it's not firsthand information. I'm not even sure it's secondhand, but Ford wanted access to all the data. And Waymo was like, no. We're collecting the data. It's our data. And that's what broke down. And FCA said, hey, we don't care if you collect the data. We just want to get into this AV industry, but we don't have a whole lot of money. So we're going to partner. And that's been actually their strategy. They talked about this several years ago, that they were not going to go and spend billions of dollars on autonomous technology because they just didn't see the market for it. They did see that it could be a future market. And so they decided, let's partner with somebody. I've talked to engineers who have worked on FCA engineers who have worked on that minivan. They say they have learned a ton working with Waymo, a ton. So they're not just leaving, connectors in the van for Waymo to hook its stuff up with. They're learning a lot in terms of autonomy. And they've taken the same strategy with electrics. They've said, look, quite frankly, we don't have the money to go out and develop $1 billion skateboard. We're going to wait until the market's there. And in fact, they may not have ever gotten there. And that's why they were so willing to merge with Peugeot. And Carlos Tavares at Peugeot has said, yeah, now we're going to have the resources to really go after BEVs.
So now they have the money to build that skateboard.
Well, but listen to the list of brands that you went through, Gary. I mean, that is extraordinary. FCA has too many brands, or I would say Chrysler may have too many brands. Fiat's got too many brands. Peugeot's got too many. Excuse me. I see some axes falling when this merger goes through.
Yeah, when you were going through that list, it was almost reminiscent. I was thinking of General Motors when it had Oldsmobile and Pontiac and Saturn.
Saab.
Saab. So here we are, how many years later, a dozen or so years later, where FCA, PSA is at the same precipice.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I wonder. Fiat Chrysler have been starving the Chrysler and Dodge brands. Chrysler's down to the minivan. That's it. There's I think a Dodge version. I think it's the Caravan, but it's the Pacifica. Dodge is down to 3 models. And really, you could almost argue one platform. There's the Charger and the Challenger. So 2-door and 4-door. And they have the Durango. That's it. And the money that could have filled those brands up have gone into Alfa Romeo and Maserati. From a financial standpoint, it's been a disaster. I mean, Chrysler and Dodge are slowly shrinking away. And all Alfa Romeo and Maserati do are bleed money. It hasn't worked at all. So what I wonder is there an opportunity with Peugeot Citroën coming on board to rebuild at least the Chrysler brand with Peugeot and Citroën products? They've got some very nice sedans and crossovers. And I don't know if that would fit the Dodge image. But if I'm Carlos Tavares and he very publicly announced, I want Peugeot back in the American market, why not just rebadge them as Chryslers? I mean, I don't think Carlos Tavares is going to be that worried what brand is on the car as long as he's moving more metal in the American market.
Does the American consumer want or need a French car?
They're not going to know that it's a French car. It's going to be, you know, the Chrysler Imperial or the Chrysler Cirrus, or they'll revive old names. They'll put that on, and the public won't even know that it's made in France.
Does Fiat continue to exist in any way, shape, or form?
Not in the U.S. market. I mean, here's my other theory. Fiat has been a sales disaster. The cars are cool. The cars are nice, but they're just not selling. FCA can't pull the plug because it would be at least $1 billion, my estimate, to have to close down the franchise. Far better you just let it die of its own accord. And that's what I think is happening right now. The Fiat franchise is dying. The Dodge franchise is shrinking. The Chrysler franchise is shrinking. The only way to revive the other two, Chrysler and Dodge, I think, is with Peugeot products. I just don't see how the Fiat brand can survive in the U.S. unless they do something dramatically different with the lineup.
What do you think, Pete?
Well, I don't think that they're going to put any more money into dramatically reviving the lineup, as John just said. So I would tend to agree that, Fiat, at least in North America, is a lost cause. I'm curious, thinking about the Dodge brand shrinking, the Durango is still, a very popular SUV. So, how do you kind of maintain these islands like that as the greater stands shift around it? But it's just a tough sell overall. I think, with sedans kind of fading, it's about the SUVs. And so I'm curious to see how the larger combined product portfolio might at least help with that in North America.
When I was looking into this today, I discovered what I thought was a rather interesting vehicle, the Peugeot Landtrek, which is a pickup truck. Okay. And it was developed in China by Shenyang. And oddly enough, it's not going to be sold in Europe. It's going to be sold in Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa. And so the length of this thing is 212 inches long. I checked. The length of a Ranger is 211 inches long. Okay. I mean, it's very, and, which of the three companies does not have a mid-sized pickup truck in the US market right now? I wonder if there'd be some possibility there.
Oh, they're thinking about it. Absolutely, they are. That Peugeot truck would probably have to be totally re-engineered for the U.S. I mean, look, Ford had to completely re-engineer the Ranger, the Global Ranger, to make it suitable for the U.S. market. Part of that was crash standards. Part of that was literally panel gaps. A lot of it had to do with just how well or not well the interior was appointed.
All right, we're over time, and that's all I got.
Well, that's plenty right there. That's pretty good. Pete, thanks for coming on the show again.
Well, likewise, thank you for having me on, John and Gary. It was great to be here.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, Pete.
Always good.
Yeah.
Well, good, Gary. We'll do it again next week.
Why don't we do that?
Okay. Want to thank everybody for having tuned in.